necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to 2018. It's a new year, our first show of the year, and it promises to be a very good one, just like we have for the past 3 years. Welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info program. I'm Marcia Teal, and I'm so honored to be your host to bring these programs to you. It is very difficult as a caregiver, to say the least. And we just got through the holidays, just finished New Year's Eve and Hanukkah and Christmas and all the festivities. And it is a very stressful time, although it can be a very happy time. But stress is always a big part of that. So before we begin our show, I want to let caregivers out there know some important resource information, some telephone numbers and some websites. Because before we get started, if you're a caregiver and you found this and you feel that you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed, you're at the end of your rope or you're close to the end of your rope, you don't want to get to the end, and you feel that way, that you don't know how you're going to cope, you don't know how you're going to get through the next day or hour or even minute, take a pen and write down this resource information, because I'm going to give you some places that are specific to dementia, memory loss, Alzheimer's, and you can call them, you can contact them for immediate help. So I'm going to start with people that are watching through the internet on your device. You are all over the world, and there are resources through the internet that you can call and on the phone. So let me start with you. Basically, these are some websites that you can contact, but there are also resources in your particular local area for the Alzheimer's Association, the National Alzheimer's Association. Their website is alz.org. So it's www.alz.org. Now, they also have a 24-hour helpline. That helpline number is 800-272-3900. 800-272-3900. You can call them 24/7 for help, whether it's 2 or 3 in the morning or, in the afternoon, whenever you feel that you just need to reach out and contact someone for some help, maybe someone to just listen to you. Whatever it is, don't be afraid. Reach out, get that help. Now, there's also the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. They also have a number that you can call. That number is 866-232-8484. Again, Alzheimer's Foundation of America, 866-232-8484. Give them a call. Now, going back to the Alzheimer's Association, they have different chapters throughout the country. So here in South Florida, we have what we call the Southeast Florida chapter of the National Alzheimer's Association. There are many chapters throughout the United States, so if you call the helpline, they'll be able to connect you with the chapter closest to the state where you live. and reach out to them. And they are wonderful to give you all kinds of information and resources and put you in contact with other people that can help in your particular situation. Here in this area of South Florida, we're lucky enough to have another organization called the Alzheimer's Community Care, ACC for short. Now, ACC is a local to here, South Florida. It's in Palm Beach County, Martin County, and St. Lucie County. So ACC, Alzheimer's Community Care, is again another wonderful resource. They actually have family nurse consultants that you can call and ask questions of. Their services are completely free, as is the Alzheimer's Association. To call ACC, if you're in the local South Florida area, Palm Beach County, Martin County, and St. Lucie County, the ACC number is 561-683-2700. Again, 561-683-2700. So write those numbers down. Keep them posted in a place where you're going to see them and get to them readily when you feel that you just can't do it anymore. Want to get help. Don't wait for a crisis to happen. Now, we're talking about caregivers. The show is for caregivers. It's also for professionals who want to learn more about caregiving. We have a lot of people on the show week after week, every Tuesday, 5 to 6 Eastern Time, and we are glad that you tuned in today. There are caregivers all across the world who have watched the show. We've heard from several of them. And I'm so glad that you all, get back with us and let us know that we're being helpful and the information that we give is something that you can use. But sometimes people are not even sure if they are a caregiver. I mean, it's hard to fathom if you are a caregiver, but if you can go back and think about when you first began doing things for somebody and you didn't even realize that you were a caregiver. So I came across a definition of what a family caregiver is. So what are caregivers? A family caregiver is a non-paid caregiver, and then there are professional caregivers also, and those are caregivers that you can pay that come from different companies, home health companies or private companies that come in and consider private duty caregivers that come into your home and help. But this show focuses mostly on the family caregiver. That's who we address because family caregivers aren't trained. They don't go to school on how to be a caregiver like a lot of professional caregivers do. So I'm going to share with you this definition of what is a caregiver so that maybe you can help other people realize that maybe they are a caregiver and they don't even realize it. So what is a caregiver? A caregiver is anyone who provides help to another person in need. Usually, that person has a serious health condition and needs help with basic daily tasks. Caregivers help with things such as shopping, cooking, paying the bills, giving medicine, bathing, toileting, dressing, eating, and more. People who are not paid to provide care are known as informal caregivers or family caregivers. Others include adults caring for other relatives, such as grandparents, siblings, aunts and uncles, spouses caring for husbands or wives, middle-aged parents caring for disabled adult children, adults caring for neighbors or friends, and children caring for a disabled parent or elderly grandparent. So if you fit into one of those categories or know somebody that does, then you're most likely a family or non-paid caregiver. And this show is just for you. We bring it to you because there's a lot of resources out there, but there's never too many resources. And so this is a way for you to find information, to hear from other caregivers who have walked in your shoes, to get that information directly from them, and also to hear from professionals in the field about things that caregivers need to know about, such as getting your documents, your legal paperwork in order, talking about interactions with social workers and taking good care of yourself, which is very, very important to do if you're a caregiver. So we bring to you professionals in the field as well as actual caregivers to share their stories. So thank you all for tuning in. I'm so glad that you did. Today we're having a caregiver on the show who he's a gentleman who cares for his wife. And he has a story to tell, and he's going to share his story in just a minute when we come back from our first commercial break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Hi, I'm Michael Mole, owner of Senior Helpers of South Palm Beach. Senior Helpers is dedicated to providing.
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
Wish to share a story? Call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and today my special guest is not only a caregiver for his wife. I've known him for about 3 years, and he's an awesome man. I'm just so pleased to have him with us today, and his name is Gus Litvak. Hi, Gus.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you know, Gus, it's a new year, and I wanted to say Happy New Year to you, but, you know, I know your situation, and I know that it's hard to be happy when you're a caregiver for a wife who has memory loss. And we're going to talk about that today. And you're going to share with us your insights and your expertise, because who knows better than someone who's done it, and you're there in the trenches every day. So thank you again for coming to share your story. Tell me about your wife. Her name is Kathy.
She's a pharmacist. She is one of the 100 children that survived Terezin concentration camp.
Oh, my.
During World War II. She grew up, her father died in Auschwitz. She grew up with a mother in a small town near Budapest in Hungary. And when she was 12, she was brought to Chile. She grew up in Chile, where I met her. She went to the School of Pharmacy, and she became a pharmacist in Chile.
Wow, she really, overcame some big obstacles.
Oh, yes. And as soon as we came to the United States in 1970, within a couple of years, she was able to revalidate her pharmacy degree in the state of New York.
Wonderful.
So she had a magnificent and wonderful career as a pharmacist.
Wonderful. Now, tell me, this is prior to any memory loss, what is Kathy's personality, personally? Is she an outgoing person? Is she a quiet person? I mean, obviously we know she's determined and dedicated and driven because of what she accomplished.
She was not quiet. She was almost the archetype of a Jewish mother, She organized everything. She commandeered everything. She gave orders to everybody, and she organized everything.
Okay, so very organized,
yeah.
in kind of a little controlling type of personality.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. And did you all have children?
Two boys. One of them was born in Chile, the other in the States. The young one is a doctor in Boston, a cardiologist, and the elder one is kind of famous in his own ways, the accidental Talmudist. He's a lawyer, but he became very religious and dedicated his life to the Talmud.
Well, you got some
he
very
lives in Los Angeles.
very good. You have some accomplished children also.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're retired, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Kathy obviously retired, but we're going to talk about when she retired and if it had anything to do with her memory loss. But tell me what a typical day was like before anything strange started happening. Typical day. I guess you guys are both going to work and you're busy.
Well, no, I retired in in 2004, at the end of 2004, beginning of 2005. And so Kathy retired as well.
Okay.
But she's semi-retired because she was working for the American Society of Pharmacy and she could do monograms working through the internet. So she had a full employment, but from home.
Very good.
And I dedicated myself primarily to play golf, beginning in 2005 in Florida. And she continued writing monograms until about 2009,
Okay.
where it became clear that her writing of monograms wasn't what it had been before.
Okay, so explain that a little bit, because was this the first time that you noticed anything was awry?
No, Kathy was also a bridge life master. She was a spectacular bridge player. I'm not a bad bridge player, but I was not in her class, and I started noticing mistakes around 2008, 2009. So I knew that something wasn't right. And then she started forgetting things and misplacing things, and so I didn't know what was going on, but I knew that something wasn't right. But she was able to function.
Okay. So did you approach her about her making mistakes?
Yes.
And how did that go?
She denied it flatly. And she developed a system to deal with her memory loss. She would make lists. She numbered all the drawers, and she would put a number on each drawer, and then he would make a list of what was in each drawer.
Because she's an organized person.
And she would then started putting everything. The problem is that she then started losing the lists. It was so sad.
Yeah.
But she fought it teeth and nail.
Yeah. Her personality, being that organized person her whole life, helped her to cope when she was losing the ability and some of her cognitive abilities. And you can see that plainly by what she did. When did she actually realize or admit that something was wrong with her memory?
I don't think she ever, I don't know when she realized, but she never admitted. Never.
Because, again, controlling person, right?
At one point, one of my best friends in Florida is a doctor. He advised me to take her to a neurologist. This was in 2011 or end of 2011.
So maybe about 3 years after you started noticing little things, okay?
And the neurologist made a little test, and they decided that there was some cognitive problem, and he recommended psychometric testing, which I had no idea what it was, but it turned out to be a 3-hour
ordeal.
And she hated it, and she was furious. But and it was very difficult for me to get her to submit to that. But she did, and the guy was a PhD in whatever, decided that she had dementia. I mean, she didn't know which kind of dementia, but it was clear that she had a dementia.
Okay.
And she gave her directly the bad news that this was progressive. She took it very badly.
Oh.
I think he handled it very poorly.
You think the doctor handled it poorly? What do you think he could have done better?
At that point, what could she gain by knowing what was happening to her?
Well, if Kathy, in her mind, now she didn't admit it to you, and because she was a controlling person, and usually one of the first things that people do when they do have memory loss themselves is deny it. They don't want to
Yeah.
accept it, but eventually they do, maybe in their own way internally, but they don't want to admit it to other
Admit it.
people. So she could have known, and maybe that the fact that if the doctor told her what the diagnosis was, it could have at least let Kathy know what's causing her to do the things she does or forget the things she does. Because even though she didn't admit it, people are scared usually when they don't have control. And because she was a controlling person, can you imagine maybe that she would feel frustrated or upset, like not being able to do the things she used to do. So maybe that's the reason, because he felt that it would help to at least give a name to the problem.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
I mean, I don't know because I wasn't there, but I'm just thinking about and it might be a topic of controversy, whether do you tell the person or you don't tell them, and I guess everybody has their own philosophy about that.
Yeah.
So if he didn't tell her and things got worse, you just don't know what would have happened. But by knowing, did you feel relieved that you knew what it was? Or how did you feel when the doctor told you?
Very depressed.
Depressed, yes, of course.
Well, he recommended to go back to the neurologist, and which we did.
Did Kathy go on medications at that point?
Yes, they put her on these two medications that were available at the time, which seemed to be completely useless. Namenda, and I forgot the name of the
Aricept.
Aricept, and they're good for nothing.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if they're working or not, and sometimes people have bad side effects with them and you can't take them.
It didn't help her.
Okay. So now that she knows, did your life change immediately in any way?
Yes, well, she was getting worse and worse, and a number of incidents happened. For example, I don't know, once she got very upset getting out of CVS, and she got upset with me, and she started walking in the middle of Congress Road, in the middle of the traffic. I had to call the police. She kind of lost a little bit the sense of, I don't know, reality or whatever.
Poor judgment, for sure.
Yes. And there were a few incidents like that, and then she would start getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and taking a shower and getting dressed to go to the office. And, and a couple of times she left, and I didn't realize that she left. And then luckily I live in a gated community, so it wasn't so difficult to find her. So relatively shortly thereafter, it became clear that I needed an aid.
Ah, okay. So things were really changing more rapidly
Very,
than not.
very quickly. By 2011 and 2012, and the biggest problem was to stop her from driving.
That's one of the biggies right there, especially with somebody who really likes the control of that car and the car keys. How did you handle that?
Well, I got the neurologist to do the only thing that I think was useful. To tell her that he had to report it to the motor vehicle, and therefore her license was suspended. And that was the only way I could get her to. And then I convinced her that the aide wasn't really an aide, but a driver that could take it anywhere and do other things for her.
Okay, well, right there, you showed your creativity being a caregiver, a brand new caregiver, because you had to kind of ease the situation to keep her from really being angry and getting all upset, because you kind of appeased her and you kind of walked that that line where it's like, do I just tell her the truth, or do I tell that little therapeutic fib and make her feel better about the whole thing? And so that's one of the things that caregivers have to decide to do. And some people hate making those decisions like, I don't like to lie to them, but if you don't, they can't be in our reality. And you said she lost her reality.
Completely.
Yeah, Now, how old was Kathy when she was diagnosed?
This was 2012, right? Mm-hmm. So
Approximately.
for 59. I mean, 69.
69, okay. And that's young. I mean, that is young. And you never found out from the doctor specifically what kind of dementia?
Well, not at the beginning. Sometime later, my son, who is a doctor, kind of insisted, and we did some nuclear test, which found, apparently without any doubt, because they didn't say it seems, they just said that there was a definitive lack of activity in the frontal and temporal lobes. So they diagnosed a frontotemporal lobe dementia, which is different. So I immediately read everything that you could read about that. But the problem is that her dementia did not fit very well the literature.
It's not always black and white. No. Even with Alzheimer's, you can see a person and they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but they're not going to always fit the same profile of somebody else who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Right. And so it's not always black and white, and all the symptoms and the behaviors don't fit neatly into one little box. So they sometimes bleed over to other things.
Right. Mm-hmm. Especially that literature said that this is one of the fastest acting dementias. But in Kathy's case, it hasn't been fast at all. She's been it's been progressing very slow. Mm-hmm. Things got critical when she fell in the house and she broke her hip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, things change. I mean, sometimes we're forced to go with the flow, and sometimes, we're forced to make those decisions for the ones that we're caring for because of certain things that happen. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, Gus is going to explain why that was critical when Kathy fell and broke a hip and what it forced him to do. So we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Do you need the advice of an elderly?
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among
Question or wish to share a story? Call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
My guest today is Gus, and he is a caregiver for his wife, Kathy. We've been talking about Kathy's journey through dementia. And Gus, you were talking about before commercial break about things changing and learning, and you said you read everything that you could read about frontal temporal lobe dementia because that's what the diagnosis was. Did you ever go to support groups?
Yes, I started going in the middle of 2014. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what kind of pushed you into going? Because at this point, Kathy had the memory loss for several years.
I was so depressed before that I went to a psychologist. And the psychologist pretty much told me that the best thing I could do was to go to a support group. And I think she was right. The support group was wonderful. I feel that I was so depressive at the time. God knows what I could have done. I was so depressed. Mm-hmm. And talking to people that were going through this, that had gone through this, and talking to the woman that was, managing or facilitating, was very, very useful. I realized that I was not alone in this thing. And so many practical things that you learn in a support group. It was a wonderful thing. I don't know how I would have managed without that support group.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you shared that, because a lot of people say support groups aren't for them because they, but everybody's different. And, you found a support group that served your interest and your purposes.
Yeah. Well, this was wonderful.
Okay, so you learned a lot, and that helped you to cope.
Yeah, but more than that, the support group also became. You see, when your spouse has dementia, your social life, at least mine, collapsed. Mm-hmm. When Kathy was the social organizer of everything, I never organized any social activity, and the support group became my social life.
Yes.
Little by little.
Yes.
You go out for a coffee, you do this, and before you know, it's your new social support group.
And it's easier to make those connections when you have something in common with them to obviously.
They all have exactly the same problem.
Mm-hmm. So you made some new friends, and that's wonderful, because that'll help with the depression.
Yes.
Also.
Yes, it helped a lot.
Yes, that's really good. So that's wonderful, and thank you for that. You mentioned also right before break that at some point you decided to bring help into the home to get her some help. And what made you realize that you couldn't do it yourself anymore?
Well, several things happened. I mean, Kathy got out of control once and started crossing a big avenue, putting her life at risk. I had to call the police. I didn't know how to I can't physically restrain her.
And you can't be 24/7 around the clock either.
And then at night, she would get dressed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and go to the office or whatever. Mm-hmm. By that time, she was no longer driving, thanks God. And it got to the point that I just couldn't control her 24/7. So I got aides.
Okay.
Thanks God I could afford them.
Did Kathy accept the help from the aide?
Well, not quite. She was very dismissive. Mm-hmm. But I convinced her that the main purpose of the aide was to be her driver, like her valet. And I didn't mention at all the aide functions, just that she was an assistant, because since she couldn't drive, now she had somebody that could take her wherever she wanted.
So
eventually she accepted.
Okay, and so that was part of their routine, was the aide took her to driving in places.
And to coffees and these and shopping.
Get her hair done and all that. Okay, so that worked out for a while.
Yes.
But then something terrible happened. What happened?
She fell at home and she broke her hip. And this was a disaster. We took her to the hospital. The hospital was good. I think the surgeon did a good job. Unfortunately, there is a little nerve problem that caused a drop foot, but I have since learned that that sort of thing happens, and you cannot really blame the surgeon for that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it was the anesthesia or the hospital or what, but she declined precipitously after that. Mm-hmm. But tremendous. And after that,
they sent her to rehab because of it?
Yes, she went to rehab to Heartland, which is the only dementia specialized rehab in the area. Mm-hmm.
Because once they break the hip, they have to usually go into a rehab.
Rehab for somebody with dementia.
Yeah, it's hard because they can't remember what they're supposed to do, and so the therapists there try their best, but the person can't remember to do the activities, to do the exercises. They don't comprehend.
Awful.
Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult. And sometimes you wonder, is this really helping?
But it became very clear at that point that she had to be in an institution, that we couldn't handle this at home.
Did you think about that yourself, or did you have pressure from family or friends?
No, well, my son, the doctor, helped me on this. He thought that she should be in an institution. But I think it was primarily talking to the people in the support group that convinced me that the time had arrived under the circumstances. And then, of course, I visited every facility I could find.
You went searching, and when you
but I had done that earlier.
You had,
and I was looking for a daycare center, and she had been going to daycare for a while.
Okay, good. So when the support group, they probably kind of ganged up on you a little bit, and kind of said, this is the way it is, because that's what support groups do.
Yeah.
They see it when you don't see it.
But also, I was explained by the facilitator that experience shows that after a stay in a hospital and in a rehab place, I mean, it's not that it's ideal, but if you're going to place somebody in a memory care facility, that might be the best time, because they're not going from home. They're going from a rather unfriendly environment to another environment which is actually more friendly than the one in which they were.
Right, and that usually is a good time to make that transition. Of course, people shouldn't wait until there's a crisis in order to make that transition. But if you're in that crisis, it's an opportunity to make the transition, because you say she's not back at home, and it's a little easier if they're used to being away from you, 24/7. They're used to not being in their home. They're in a rehab, and then make that switch over to an assisted living or memory care assisted living. Sometimes people go straight into the nursing home part, but I think assisted living is better if you can qualify, to go there. And it's sort of like it eases. It's not as difficult.
Yes.
Yeah. We used to say, you're going to graduate. Okay. You're here doing rehab, and the doctor said you're doing so well that he's going to let you graduate to finish up, in another place that he's recommended for you. And so it makes them feel like they're doing well, and they have hope that things are going to get better. And we all know they're not going to go back home because of the situation, but it makes it's more palatable.
Yeah, and a memory care facility, I imagine all of them, but at least certainly the one I chose, is a much nicer environment than a nursing home, no matter how good the nursing home
Right.
may be.
Yeah, and that's what most people would prefer, again, if they qualify, because you have to qualify not only financially, but the person has to qualify to see if they're qualified to, in as far as being appropriate to be in that kind of environment. So lucky for you that Kathy got to go to a memory care assisted living. And she's been in one for about 3 years now?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So that being said, now you're living away from her 24/7. How hard was it for you once Kathy went into the assisted living? You're home alone. You already had depression issues. You're home alone, and there's nobody there. And how hard was that?
Very hard.
Yeah.
I tell you, I would lie if I tell that it gets easier. It doesn't.
No.
Just, I want to start crying here.
That's okay. We have tissues.
It gets very hard.
Yeah. Did you continue to go to your support group during this time?
Yes.
And were they helpful for you through this transition for you?
Yes. But after a while, what happens with support groups, I found, is that support groups have sort of, a cycle of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, there were a lot of new people in the support group. And I was able to give advice to people in the support group, but I was past the point where the support group was being useful to me.
But did that not do something for you by helping others
Yes,
through it?
yes, it did, but it didn't. But the support group wasn't as useful,
Not to
as it
you,
was.
but you were useful to it.
Yes, I was.
And sometimes caregivers, when they don't have their purpose anymore by caring for their loved one day in and day out at home,
Yeah.
they lose their purpose. And I know that there are a lot of men. I'm so glad that you're here. You're going to speak for the men caregivers, but there are a lot of men who delay placing their wives in dementia-assisted living just for the fact that they don't want to be alone, because they'll be alone and that scares them.
Well, the reason why, she went from the rehab to, because that was the best for her.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I didn't feel at the time that it was the best for me.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, what mattered was what presumably was best for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was a very depressing thing. I started going every day to the memory care facility where she is.
And you still go every day?
Every day.
Wow. Do you ever feel that it's too hard for you to visit every day, or what motivates you?
I am not convinced that it makes a huge difference to her whether I go or I don't. Probably doesn't. But it makes a difference for me. I go because I want to go, not necessarily because I think that she needs me there. Although she shows a certain amount of joy when she sees me. I just need.
It's what you do for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you do other things for you too, because I know you have friends and you continue to, do some social activities, which is important.
Kathy and I used to do dancing, was one of our big things. And so one of the ladies of that support group likes to dance, so I have a dancing partner, which helps me. Once in a while I go dancing, I play a lot of golf. And there was a rabbi that gave Shabbat services in this place, and the poor guy died. And then there was a Canadian couple that did it for a while, and that didn't seem to work very well. So somehow I ended up doing the Shabbat services in the memory care facility. And apparently I was doing it okay, because then they asked me to do the same thing in another memory care facility in Boca Raton.
So all of a sudden you have a new purpose.
So now I have two. And, you have to prepare yourself. You have to have little stories. So, and I prepare music, and I have these Bluetooth speakers so that I can bring music to the service. And that, between the golf and the dancing and the services, I try to keep myself busy.
You keep busy. That's very good.
I also belong to some discussion groups where we try to fix the world, of course, and we never succeed.
Well, let me know if you do. That would be very good to know. I want to be the first to know how you're going to do that. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with more wisdom from Gus. So be right back.
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know, we understand, we can help. Arden Courts. Wandering is a common problem for people with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's also a problem for family members who care for them. Keeping them safe and secure means never letting your guard down. And even though deep down you know it's time, it hurts to have to ask for help. But it could hurt them even more if you didn't. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementia.
Or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Welcome back. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts has about 50 dementia-specific assisted livings all across the United States, and memory care is all they do. So Arden Courts is a great resource for you to call, to get information, to get lots of resources, to get support group information, to attend seminars. And one of the things that Arden Courts would like to do for you today is offer this free book. This is called the 36-Hour Day Book. It's a wonderful resource for caregivers. It's been reprinted many, many times, which means that it's always being updated and it's very relevant. It talks about all kinds of different types of dementia with explanations. It gives wonderful hints and tips and emotional support also. So if you're a caregiver or know someone who is and you don't have this book, I would highly recommend that you call Arden Courts on their toll-free number and get this book mailed to you. That number is 888-478-2410. Again, the number is 888-478-2410. Let them know that you heard about the offer on Caregiver Solutions Info Show, and they'll be happy to get your name and address and mail a copy absolutely free to you. So my guest is Gus, and we've been talking about his wife, Kathy, and his caregiving efforts. And Gus, I just, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know it's very emotional. It's a very hard thing to discuss. And it's been 3 years that Kathy's been in a dementia-assisted living. She was diagnosed several years before that, and even before that, her symptoms started showing. You said to me during commercial break something that I think everybody should hear about, does it get easier? Will you say that again, what you said to me?
No, it doesn't get easy. I mean, anybody that tells you that as time goes by, a caregiver, that the pain will ease up, or that, no, it doesn't. It never eases up. Mm-hmm. It's, well, I mean, look, she's my wife of 53 years. I mean, how could it ease up? I don't know if the same thing applies to a sibling or a parent, but in the case of having a wife, it doesn't ease up at all.
Yeah, it's not easy, and it doesn't get easier. And I think that's why a lot of people call this disease the long goodbye, because you know ultimately where you're headed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And, I know I've known you for about 3 years, and you always have a smile on your face. You're to me, a happy person. You're a very positive person. So knowing how you feel, how do you exude this positivity? How do you make it through every day with the pain that you have inside of you? What do you attribute that to?
I think I have learned many, many years ago, maybe because of my job, who knows what, to compartmentalize. In other words, this is this, and this is this, and if now I'm saying hello to you, I'm focusing on saying hello to you, and try to think on one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. That perhaps explains why I can do that. Also, I kind of get a kick out of making people smile. I don't know why.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing. So you volunteer, and that's one of your activities that you do, and you volunteer at the assisted living, and that in itself make a lot of people happy, because I know that you're there, you do Shabbat services, and the Shabbat services are for the residents that live there. And I've been there when you've been doing the service, and they are so focused because you're there sharing with them, and you do make them happy. And I want to thank you personally for doing that.
You know, it also helps some of the relatives because it's not easy to visit somebody with dementia. I mean, you don't have much to talk about. And I have found out that many relatives come during the service because that way they are together with their loved one. They don't have to talk. They just sit there.
But yet they're together.
Yes.
So they're sharing something together, which is a lovely thing to do.
Yeah. And also, if you go every day to a place for 3 years, what happens is that you end up knowing all the residents. And you know their weaknesses and their problems, and you know how to make them smile, and you know how to calm them. And so it's like almost every person that, relative that goes there every day ends up being sort of free caregiver for everybody. At least that's what happens.
Well, they become involved and connected, and it's almost like it's all one big extended family when you're in a great assisted living for memory care that has that kind of environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see in the group that we have there, you know them all, and everybody pitches in for everybody.
Yeah, it's the camaraderie. We're all in this together. What can we do to help? So before we end today's show, what advice, knowing now that you've been on this journey a long time, since back before 2008, with being a caregiver and looking back now, what advice would you give to caregivers, something that you learned along the way that you would like to share? And it could be several things.
Well, I think the main thing that allowed me to survive is that you have to understand that life has to go on. I mean, you have to do things. You have to get involved. You have to somehow remake a social life. Because, the people that used to be your best friends in these situations they have sometimes trouble dealing with when one spouse has dementia.
You're not included in the same group that you were before, right? You almost feel like you're a third wheel or something.
Yes. You really, if you're going to survive this, and if you're going to be useful to your loved one, you have to have a life of your own. I have only one preoccupation in life. I want to live longer than my wife. Because if I die before, the kids will take care of her, but they have their lives. It would never be the same. So I need to live longer than she does, or as long as. Which means I'm taking better care of myself. And it's something that I never did before.
No? You have a motivation, you have goals now to take care of yourself, not only, as a human being, but as a caregiver, so that you can be there for your spouse.
Dieting, I'm always trying to lose weight, generally speaking, trying to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Very important. And we're always preaching that to caregivers, take care of yourself. And you're living proof. You do it. You have to do it. And if it's only because you want to be there for your loved one as the motivation, then take care of yourself. Because if you don't, you won't be there for them.
I am pretty sure that if I would have continued, the chances are very good that I wouldn't.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. This is a new year. What do you hope for in the new year?
Oh God. Maybe my golf handicap will get a little lower. Now, look, I hope what I wish to my friends and everybody with Kathy is have a year which is uneventful. That's what I wish. I don't want anything to happen this year.
So when you say uneventful, you mean nothing bad to happen?
No diseases, no falls, you know.
Just to
nothing like
have
that.
peace.
Yes.
Peace. Thank you, Gus. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming here and giving us your heart. Really appreciate it. You're a very good caregiver. You're a very good person.
Thanks.
And it just means a lot to me, and I'm sure to our audience today, to hear about your journey and how you handled it, and maybe it helped somebody else.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all, too, for joining in. Have a happy new year, and if it can't be happy, I hope it's better. That's all we can hope for, is to have a better year in any way that we can. So don't forget, we'll be here same time, same place next year, or next week, sorry, I'm in the new year, next week. Tuesdays, and we hope that you'll join us again for another wonderful show. We've got them all lined up for you. And in the meantime, give somebody a hug, because they need it, and so do you. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program wish the world know that being heard via advertisements is the name of the game. AmpSquare.tv understands how important advertisement is and is proud to express that it's truly the only plugged-in internet television production company on the market. Amp2.tv live streams all their shows across all the major selling markets in the U.S. and abroad. Call them at 866-224-5422. The AmpSquare.tv library allows productions to be seen over and over again, making commercial platforms more